This is the question I get asked the most. What is happening with the DriveTribe V10 MX-5? Well, here's the story as of the 21st of August, 2024. Let's start at the beginning. How did this MX-5 V10 project come to fruition at all? Well, when I first started at DriveTribe, I was a journalist, I was a writer, and I loved anything with a V10 engine. So I started up a listicle of the top X cars that have a V10 engine. And through that research, I somehow stumbled upon this car called the Connaught Type D. It was a sports car in the late 90s into the early 2000s that was conceptualized by the guys at Connaught. Now, Connaught used to be a racing brand from the 1950s, and it had been resurrected in the 90s via some Welsh government money to get back going. Reminds me of modern TVR, and that hasn't exactly gone too well. So I started diving into this car, and it was unbelievably interesting because it wasn't just some V10 taken from, I don't know, a Dodge Viper or a Lamborghini or an Audi. No, this was a bespoke V10 in something roughly MX-5 size, and it was 2 litres. Now, I've done a video about how certain displacements match certain engine layouts. Normally, a V10 is 5 litres if you do 500cc per cylinder. Most V10s, when you look across the board, there are 5 litres or thereabouts 5 litres. So for this engine to be 2 litres, what was going on with that? That was crazy small. So I started delving deeper, and I found all these articles from Autocar and Auto Express, Top Gear, from back in the day, back in the 90s, that were talking about this thing as a concept. Now, sadly, that car never actually made it into production, but there are some videos online of that 2-litre V10 running. And there seemed to be physical cars about. There were pictures of the Connaught Type D at car shows. Then the big cough hit, and I was sitting in my house back in Scotland and needed to make DriveTribe videos. So I decided to make one of my sit-down Mike's Mechanics videos about the Connaught Type D, talking about that crazy 2-litre V10 engine. And it went nuts. Now, that video gained so much traction that I started thinking, right, we need to look more into this. So I started doing more and more journalistic investigation. And I suddenly came across a company called Davidson International. They owned the rights to Connaught. They'd bought the name when it had gone defunct. And after a few emails and a few conversations, it turned out that they had all the stuff from Connaught. They had the show cars and they had the engine blocks. So suddenly, this forgotten 90s V10 car and engine might actually come back to life. So, some emails later, and we got an invite to go down to Davidson International HQ and have a look at it all. That day was very special because not only did the car get wheeled out and we got to see the proper, genuine Connaught Type D show car, we also went round the back and started up that 2-litre V10 engine.
Here we go.
I thought we'd just see some engine blocks up on some shelves, but no, they actually had it fully set up on a rig, and we started the damn thing up. And it sounded like a miniature Dodge Viper V10. It was that sort of muscly V10. Not a high-pitched singing Carrera GT type engine. Yeah, something a bit beefier, a bit more muscly. We couldn't run it for long because they weren't too sure about the lubrication and the cooling going on. So yeah, we ran it for about a minute and then shut it off. But that was enough. That was enough to spark an idea in my head. After that day, I got my laptop out and sent the guys an email saying, you've got an amazing engine, you've not got a car, you've just got a show car. So why not put that amazing 2-litre V10 in the most popular sports car in the world, the most popular beginner sports car in the world, the Mazda MX-5. I had a 1998 Mark II MX-5 up in Scotland, so I brought it down to a garage we were working with at the time and started restoring that. The first thing we did though was actually test fit the engine block in the engine bay, and that 2-litre block fitted perfectly. Even though it would have a plenum on it and sumps and stuff coming off the side as well, manifolds and all that, it would fit so snugly into a Mazda MX-5, which got me very excited. Now, we started restoring my Mark II so that it was in decent shape to have that engine go into it. And this garage was, you know, doing patchwork here and there, but I knew this car needed much more than that. So I actually took it away to the MX-5 restorer down in the south of England, where we actually bought this car from. We'll get to this in a bit. They looked under it and said, this is the worst Mark II MX-5 we have ever seen. I've since learned that basically Scottish cars, especially seaside ones, are pretty much the worst cars you can buy in the entire UK. So I had this thing, and fair play, they saw I loved the car and they committed to it, and they fully restored my Mark II MX-5. That car is currently in the DriveTribe exhibition in the Haynes Museum. So if you've been to that, you will see the Connaught engine block sitting in my Mark II MX-5, waiting for that engine to be developed. The car's ready to go. That car is looking mint. Now, let's get on to why it doesn't have the 2-litre block in it. Now, I love that Mark II MX-5 so much because one, it was the first rear-wheel drive car I'd ever owned, and also it was a car that me and my dad welded up and fixed as best we could on my driveway up in Scotland. Now, the MX-5 restorer guys since found our welding, and it's actually sitting in the reception. There's a block of just a kind of hodgepodge of bits of metal that got my car through an MOT, so I didn't care, but to them, yeah, it was, they had some choice words for me and my dad's welding. This is part of my sill and the start of the wheel arch that was originally on the car. And as you can see, it's a very functional fix. Literally bits of metal welded in place to give it some sort of structure. So why does the 2-litre V10 MX-5 not currently exist? Well, it's because the 2-litre V10 engine isn't finished. Now, when I first turned up at Connaught and we got this engine running day one, I thought, wow, this is going to be a few weeks tweaking things here and there. They're going to weld it to a subframe and we're going to be good to go. Turns out that wasn't exactly the case. The reason we had to run it so short, you know, they said lubrication and cooling, there were some serious lubrication and cooling issues with the engine, so much so that it would seize if we ran it for any longer than we did. So there needed to be an engineering redesign, specifically of the crankshaft. They were going to use something called a roller bearing crank, which is essentially MotoGP technology. But basically what it means is it can spin up really quickly. And they were saying this 2-litre V10 was going to spin up past 12,000 RPM, which would help it make, you know, 200 horsepower plus. 2 litres NA shouldn't create that much, but yeah, by simply revving it to that level, you could get it up past 200 horsepower, maybe even towards 300. We don't know yet. What I totally underestimated was just how much development work had to go into this 2-litre V10 engine. They were essentially starting from scratch. So they were developing the crank, that was the main thing, and you may have seen videos on DriveTribe where we talk specifically with Phil, the CEO of Davidson International, about the crank and the progress they were making. Since then, there's just been more and more complications. This engine has been sprouting issues almost month after month. I almost have a scheduled email with the guys at Davidson to get an update on how things are going. And it's just one thing after another, which is good. It means they're cracking on with the development and they're finding these issues, which means we are step by step getting closer to that engine being a thing. The latest news is, well, it's good and not so good at the same time. They're creating this VR10 engine, but the whole point in it is that it's modular. You could get it down to a V-twin, you could get it up to a V12, a V16, whatever you wanted. You can multiply up by 2. Davidson International owns many other brands, and some of them are motorbike brands. So what the plan is they're going to create a smaller engine. They're going to use the same technology, but modulate down to a V6. So 2-litre V10, this will be a 1.2-litre V6 that will fit into some motorbikes. Now, smaller engine, smaller crankshaft, smaller everything, that's going to be an easier engine to develop, and they'll be able to put it into more vehicles and develop it to then build back up to the V10. So it's a good thing because it's another step in the process, and there will be a lot of learnings from the V6 that can then be put into the V10, which means it will be developed quicker. But once we get there, now we essentially have to wait for this V6 to be developed before the V10 comes along. So the main issue with the 2-litre V10 MX-5, the original DriveTribe V10 MX-5, is time. Just the sheer amount of time that's needed to develop that V10 engine. We will get there, it's just going to take time. So with my Mark II locked into a V10 engine that wasn't built yet, I came up with a new plan. Get another MX-5 and put a V10 engine in it that actually exists. You don't need to develop anything, you just need to slot it in. And that's where this car comes in. So, my car was a Mark II. You could say if you were going to have the world's first V10 MX-5, it should be in everyone's favourite, the Mark I. So, I bought this one from our pals at the MX5 Restorer. Now the good thing about this, it's not an immaculate car, so we're happy to cut it up, but it's solid in all the right places. You'll see down the sides, all the sills and arches that rot out on these cars had just been done. So this car was rock solid. It's actually had a bit of a dent on this front arch here and it started to corrode here, but yeah, that's a 50 quid piece, it's all good. So what V10 were we going to put in this? Well, it was going to be, of course, the BMW S85 5-litre V10 because we'd had such an amazing time with our BMW M5 Touring at Everything M. So we took this car to Dara and said, are you up for it? He was like, yeah, we'll give that a go. So first things first, we just tried to figure out whether we could get that engine into this engine bay. You can actually see plenty, quite crude cutting happened, but we cut into the subframe, stripped everything out, and it went in. We managed to close this bonnet on a fully fledged S85. It was very cool seeing it in place. If this clicks down, this is installed.
I'm going to leave it to you, mate. Go on.
That is in.
Nice.
But then we hit a bit of a hurdle. We kind of went away and my email to Dara was saying, cool, we want to go ahead with this. How much roughly is it going to cost us? And Dara went about his business, figuring out all the bits and pieces that were going to make this car work. The number was quite high. The price varied quite a bit in terms of work that we could get done for free by filming it and advertising, businesses here and there. Also parts that we could get donated to the build, again, for sort of advertising purposes. But that number essentially swayed between 30 and 50,000 pounds. Now, considering this is a 1,500 quid MX5, it's quite a serious amount of cash to pump into one of these. And would we really get the value fully out of it? Probably not. My argument is it's not really about the value, it's being the first people to create the world's first V10 MX5. There is that guy in South Africa that's made the V12 MX5, fair play to him, but no one had done a 10-cylinder, and this would be a 500 horsepower naturally aspirated manual MX5. Unreal. So the only thing stopping this car from coming to life is money. So V10 MX5 1 is time with engine development, and this one is money. The original V10 then, my Mark II, is in the Haynes Motor Museum in the DriveTribe exhibition. So if you go to visit that, you will see it with a 2-litre engine block sitting in it, kind of in it. So you could say a V10 MX5 exists, kind of. And the second car, this one here, waiting to take the BMW engine, is situated here, round the back of Swallows Racing. What we're waiting for is one of two breakthroughs, or maybe both breakthroughs. The first one being something happening with that engine development. The V6 coming together, the V10 coming together, then suddenly that whole package will be one thing and there will be a V10 MX5 in existence. Or we have a fire-breathing, potentially quite lethal 500 horsepower BMW engined V10 MX5. It would be amazing to have one of those two things happen, maybe even both. Do not worry guys, we chat about this project in the office pretty much daily. It's not forgotten. We are doing everything we can to bring any V10 MX5 into the world. So stay tuned, bear with us. We're cracking on as hard as we possibly can. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. I've been Mike, and don't forget to subscribe to more DriveTribe.